the croissant dough. We're going to make the croissants, and it calls for milk, and it asks you to scald the milk. Is it necessary to scald the milk? Yes, it is necessary. There is a tripeptide called glutathione that we want to kill, because that particular tripeptide, which is an amino acid, makes our doughs really soft. And so if we kill that during the scalding process by bringing the milk up to 180 degrees, it's going to give us a springier and a little bit firmer bread dough and better rise in the oven. So definitely take the time to scald your milk and then bring it back down to temperature. So this is now brought back down to 105 degrees, and I'm adding my yeast to it. And I'm just going to go on and stir that up. And this is a straight dough method, so everybody in the pool at once. So I've got the bread flour going in. This recipe is in your book. I've got the sugar going in. I've got my salt going in. And I have some butter going in. And then I'm going to put it on the machine with the dough hook. And I'm going to start the machine. Speed 1, 2 clicks on a KitchenAid. Stir this up real good. And then I'm going to use the liquid to kind of knock the flour off the side. Somebody keeps stealing my towel. I'm going to knock the sugar off the side. Thank you to my lovely assistant. And I'm going to mix this for about 1.5 minutes. Now, since I'm going to roll this out, I'm not going to create a lot of gluten by really developing the dough, but I do want to get a nice smooth dough before I stop this machine. So I'm going to let it run for, like I said, about 1.5 minutes. I'll check the hydration. Guys, I did take the recipe and the milk from the milk in the recipe from 8 ounces up to 9, because I just found that the dough wasn't wet enough, and so I'm just going to give it just a little bit of time just to get it nice and smooth, because it still looks very shaggy in the bowl. And then at this point, I'm going to let it ferment for about 1 hour at room temperature. Okay, so to ferment, I'm going to spray my bowl lightly with a little bit of pan spray. First time I didn't drop it on the floor. I'm just going to pull my dough off. This is what the dough is looking like. And then I'm just going to slightly round it just a little bit. That way I can kind of keep track of my growth. And then I'm going to cover it with a piece of plastic wrap. Okay, our croissants have been fermenting for 1 hour. And when I touch it, the dent remains. So I'm going to go on, just lightly spray a sheet pan. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to flatten it out on the sheet pan. And then it's going to ferment, or I'm sorry, retard. I'm going to put it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. And then we'll start thinking seriously about doing our turns on this. So 30 minutes. Okay, so we're now going to do the lamination process on our croissants. It has been in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes. I'm going to put a little flour down. And I'm just going to pull it out of the pan. And this too needs to still have the punching done. So I'm just going to press this out. Voila, and it's punched. Okay, so I want to get rid of any of the excess dough that is on my bench. I want it clean because if there's dough on the bench, the croissant dough is apt to stick to it. So you want to make sure that your bench is clean. I'm going to take this and I'm going to start rolling it out. And if you have already watched the video on Danish, you'll notice that this is a much smaller dough. So instead of 10 ounces of butter, I'm only going to do 8 in the lamination process. And I've got that rolled out nice. And now I'm just going to start cutting my butter. Just laying my butter out. Got a little bit of a thick edge on it, so I'm just going to press that out a little bit. Now, I've been asked in the past, should I, if I get the whole thing covered and I still have butter left over, should I use it? I would, because that's what's going to give you those beautiful layers. I think I'll let my butter get a little bit too warm, so I'm going to kind of lay it on its side. A little bit thicker than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to just press that out in between the pieces of wrapper. You notice I did leave the border around the outside like I did with the Danish. And I just have a little bit of butter left, so I'm going to smash it. And just fit it on in there. So I'm going to fold this over, brush off the excess flour. I feel like I just did this. Oh, I did. And then I'm going to just take this and I'm going to come this other direction. I just finished doing turns for the Danish just a minute ago, so. Okay, so I'm going to move this over and I'm going to do its first turn. Again, you can roll this out twice before the gluten really starts to fight you. I have the lamination done. Now I'm going to do the first turn on this. Okay, you notice here's the fold right here, and right here is the edge. So I'm going to start rolling it out. Couple of times this direction. Couple of times this direction. That way the butter is being distributed evenly. We don't want any pushing on those seams. And at this point, I think we're pretty good on our sizing. Got a couple little air pockets in there. Don't drive yourself crazy over an air pocket. Brush off the excess flour. And this will be our first three-fold. The croissants only get three folds. Not nearly as many layers to a croissant as there are to a Danish. I know, I just told you not to drive yourself crazy over it, and what am I letting it do? Drive me crazy. Okay, so that is our first turn. So I'm just going to give it my little indentation. That way Bill knows I have one turn on my dough. And now I'm going to wrap it up. Okay, so we have one turn on our croissant dough. We laminated it and gave it one turn the last time around. So now we're going to put two more turns on it. That'll be a total of three folds, and then we'll put it to bed. So let's get started. I'm going to dust my bench. And here are my opened ends of my folds. Going to put a little bit of flour on top. I want to give it light pressure going both directions. You can still see the butter. If you look really closely, you can see the marbling of that butter. Brush off all the excess. Just a little bit more there on the edge. It's making me nervous. Brush off all that excess. Now, again, remember you can only roll this dough out twice before the gluten really starts messing with you. If you are going to roll out a dough and then put it in the retarder overnight and then continue to do your turns on it, they say to at least get the second turn on it before you rest it overnight in the refrigerator. That way your butter doesn't get too hard. So kind of keep that in mind. There will be a handout on laminated doughs in your blackboard. To go along with the quiz. Yay. So again, here's my open. I reoriented it to where the open ends were there on the edge. This time when I roll out, the butter shouldn't be quite as prevalent. If when you're rolling you do have a blowout and the butter starts to seep out, instead of trying to just fold that butter and the flour that has gathered around the butter into the dough itself, just go on and pull it off, get rid of it, because then you're going to end up with a starchy lump of butter that is going to do you more harm than good. Okay, so now it's time to go on and start thinking seriously about getting that last fold or turn on it. So I'm going to brush off any excess because it's going to go into the freezer for a couple of days before I do any of the makeup on it. I've noticed that with the croissant doughs, a lot of times you can still see a little bit of the dough or the butter afterwards through the dough. Don't freak out. It's okay as long as it's nice and thin, you're fine. Again, I want to get all of the excess flour off, especially since it's going to go into the freezer for a couple of days. Going to get the major portion of flour off this side. I'm going to bring it over to my plastic wrap. And I always tend to pick up a little extra flour as I'm brushing. So this way that bottom is not picking up extra flour. And that's it. We're done.